And another example, well, I was in the corporation for many years, 40 years, and I was happy with that. You know, I'd agreed to it because apparently, to me, it was the best thing on the planet at the time, so I was okay with it. But when I heard about the new presentation, it was to me, it was obvious after the second time I was on one of the Skype calls. To others, maybe not, but to me, it was so obvious that this is what I was agreeing to wasn't really hitting the mark. But this guy, Duane the Great Writer, who I was listening to on the Skype calls, I mean, what he was talking about and how he presented himself and his consciousness, his mannerism, what he was saying was so refreshing. I mean, there's just like nothing like that I ever heard. So I just made a transition. Just my agreements. It wasn't like a big deal. It was just a transition. My agreement to, okay, I agree with this because it makes sense. I no longer agree with that, even though I was there for 40 years. You know, I was happy. I was okay with it. I wasn't necessarily that happy, but I was okay. But this is so much more real and so much more fulfilling and has a purpose to it. It's so, and it's just because my agreement, now I agree to something else. And it didn't mean I had to be violent or rebel or be, I have, you had me for 40 years and like you were telling me, now I see through you, and it doesn't have to be that way either. It's just like an experience I went through, just like anything else. I don't have to have an attitude about it. So this new agreement I have now, I agree to, okay, what makes sense more? Like, what's really going on? And I agree to what's going on. I see what's going on, and I agree to that, and I agree to help to do something about it. So that's my story, Bob, Sandy.
Well, thank you, Dean Val. That was excellent. And speaking of banks, what are we thinking? We go into a bank and do business with a bank that charges 21% interest rate on a credit card, but if we want to save money and put in a CD or a savings account, they only pay you 1%. What's wrong with that picture? Something doesn't make sense there,
No, they've got us. They've got us. They know what they're doing with that. So they're not there to help people.
Thank you, Dean Val. All right. Anybody else would like to tell their story? Claudia, are you on?
Apologies, I was on mute. Yes, I would like to share an experience I had during life. I get dreams that are very vivid, and so I can recall them sometimes. One of the most interesting dreams I had so far, before coming into the new presentation, was the movie Groundhog Day. I can't remember the name of the star of the movie, but it's the guy who played in Ghostbusters.
It was Bill Murray, and they did it in Woodstock, Illinois, right in my hometown at the time. Right out on the square, right in front of the Opera House that was run by a good friend of mine at the time. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with Groundhog Day.
Oh, how amazing. And that movie exactly demonstrates, in my opinion, what we lose. Every time we reincarnate, our memory is erased. And in the movie, not to give it away if somebody hasn't watched it, is that this reporter kept having a reoccurring experience of he'd live through a day, and then he'd go to sleep, and the next morning it would be exactly the same day lived over again. And so that might explain to some people how it works on this physical plane on this planet. we get up, we have a lifetime. Maybe we're in the Jurassic age, live with dinosaurs as a one of the early mankind humanoids, or maybe we lived in Egypt as a pharaoh, or maybe we lived in Rome as a Roman soldier. We progress through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, but we don't get to recall what we learned the last lifetime. The only way we recall it, in my opinion, is that we have a talent to do something. And there are many stories about the great composers like Mozart and Bach and all of those guys that at an early age they could compose music. And people would wonder, how can this happen? How can this happen? Well, it's because lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetime, this little child has experienced music and fell in love with it, and so it became a part of his routine. Everybody has an opportunity, but some people are afraid of new things. It takes a while. That's why we have children. They're not afraid. They like to explore and find out and know stuff. If you watch a little 1-year-old crawling on the floor and seeing everything and investigating stuff, you see how we as humans start out trying to find out answers, information, and as we incorporate this in our lives, we grow up and are better able to face life, little challenges that come along, like Bob's original instance of when you first fall in love and get married, they tell you to go right down and make out your will and buy life insurance. And you say, well, I'm 20, I don't need that. I'll do that later. But those who think, oh my goodness, I have to do this. This is important. They each have a different experience that they have chosen. One time that you get to make choices is every moment of your life when you face an experience. What do you want to choose as the outcome? Some experiences are great. Getting married is wonderful. Nowadays, marriage and divorce are kind of common things. They go together hand in hand, and that's the sad part. But there are marriages that last a long time because the couple has come to share their experiences and glean more from life itself alone. Anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, Claudia. And you're talking about making a will for your death. That's, passing on your stuff to your family or whoever you want to, your kids or some institution or something. That's another way of choosing death, isn't it? It most certainly is. I'm going to die, and after I die, this is what I want to happen after I die, because I no longer have control. I have no control over dying, and I have no control after I die. So let's get it on paper. Yep, very good, Claudia. I love that one also. Is there anyone else that would like to share something else? If something else comes to mind, please speak up and share what you have. Tim, are you on? You have anything?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I was just thinking back about how when I was in the corporation, and I thought that was so important, how I came across a book, the Eckankar, it was called The Ancient Science of Prophecy, that Paul Twitchell had wrote. And I was, called fascinated with what was being stated in the book about all these yugas and all kinds of stuff that I was wondering about. Is this stuff just made up stuff, or a lot of it did seem to make sense to me. And about these techniques and things that were being presented to get out of the body, and I thought that would be something that I would decide to try and make happen in my life. So what Paul had wrote was that to get out of the body, to try this stuff called astral projection, that a person wouldn't be able to do it if they smoked and if they drank and if they did drugs, and which I did all of for a lot of my life. But the desire to try to experience this different life, different awareness, was so strong that it just was like a light switch in my life. It was more important to try and experience this astral projection stuff than it was to continue smoking and drinking and doing drugs. So that was an instant change. That was like almost 9 years ago. In December 21st, it'll be 9 years. Just by the words that Paul presented in one book that I came across. And so then in the corporation, I was very happy with this involvement and paying attention to all these discourses. It never seemed like I was successful in getting out of the body, which my life had changed to experience. I thought I would just all of a sudden be able to leave the body and look at the body out from another place, which I never did, but I think now it's pretty much I do it naturally in sleep. But it is amazing how life gives us these opportunities, like this new presentation. All of a sudden, the real guides are seeing when a person is ready to have the opportunity to find out for themselves if what is being presented in this new presentation is real, and to test it and find out for yourself if it's something that is important in your life.
Well, what I think is really so neat is if people will do the new you, sing it, and maybe we should give an example of how to sing it. I'll have Sandy sing New You the way she does it, and just to give you an idea what we're talking about when we say sing the New You.
Okay, that was a surprise. Okay, I'll sing it for you the way I sing it, but it can be sung any way. You can use any musical note or tone. You can go up, you can go down, you can do it to a song, whatever you choose to do. So, New You. That's the way I do it, and you can do it, like I said, any way you want. And go ahead, Bob.
Well, thank you, Sandy. That was very beautiful. When you sing New You and you call on the real guides, they will show you in your dream visions some of the assumptions and agreements that you made in your life that you think are just absolutely truth. There is, you think in your mind that these agreements that you have made are rock solid, but once you start working with the real guides, you may be actually surprised at, when you put it in the perspective of the all of reality, and the source of life, that it doesn't hold a candle. And when the neat thing about it is, once they show you, you see it for yourself. It's no longer somebody trying to explain something to you. Perhaps an example of that would be if you ask the Real Guides to take you to the causal plane and show you the Akashic records of a bunch of your past lives. Once you see your past lives, there's no doubt that it's you that experienced these past lives, and you'll wonder, well, wait a minute, I believe in Jesus. I don't have past lives. Well, but the Akashic record says you do, and you see it firsthand. You're not taking somebody else's word for it. And then there's another thing I want to bring up, and I should have brought this up last time. When you do make a lot of these agreements, when you get talked into something by somebody and you make an agreement, you should be very, very wary of the person that you're listening to. Do they have your best interest at hand? Well, I just realized about a week or two ago that the guy I became a born again Christian for a while, and went through the Christian belief system for about somewhere around 25 or 30 years before I saw the error of my ways when I started reading Lobsang Rampa's books. But when I looked back on it, I was trying to figure out how in the world did I make that agreement to believe that Jesus was my Savior. And I looked back on it, and I realized that the person who talked me into it, I now know is a reptilian, outright reptilian, and one of the blue bloods from European royalty. I had no idea at the time that he was part of that. And so looking back on it, I think, man, here's a reptilian trying to get me sucked into the system, and he did a wonderful job. I was like a big muskie, and I took it hook, line, and sinker, and I believed it. And then I started, and the problem is once you make those agreements, you're emotionally tap-lined, which is an emotional agreement to stick with it. I mean, you'll die for your faith, and that's about where I was until about 25 or 30 years later. I saw through the scam, and my eyes were opened, and then I realized that, hey, this was a horrible agreement that I agreed to, and I got out of it. But that's another thing, that these guys that go, these missionaries, like the Mormon Church and missionaries, they're like kind of like used car lot salespeople. They're looking for live ones, and it's like the evangelists, like Billy Graham. How many people know that Billy Graham? I went to listen to him a couple times, and when I was into that philosophy, and I thought he was the best thing since homemade pie. It wasn't until the last few years that I found out that Billy Graham, along with his buddy Oral Roberts, used to get together and have little kids for dinner. They would shapeshift into the reptilian form, and they were pedivores, not pedophiles, pedivores, just like David Icke talks about in his books about the pedivores, and you wonder where all the children go. I mean, look at the source. Go on YouTube. You can see it for yourself. They actually have people talking about all that on YouTube. Check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. It's really, really, nasty where you get your agreements from. So look at your source. And if you're a Christian today and you think what I'm saying is a bunch of nonsense, look at the source. Who was it that talked you into it in the first place? Or perhaps the other side of the coin is, maybe you were raised in it. Well, when you're raised in a religion, you make the agreement of your family. I discussed that in our last show. You agree to everything that you're raised in without question. And so but the problem is, whether it's from family or some other source, once you make this agreement, you are tap-lined on your astral body, and you become emotionally attached to it, and it's extremely difficult to break that attachment, even in the view of many, many facts to the contrary.